Hey everyone, Richard Metal Fan here, bringing you guys a brand new 2020 album review. And today we're going to be looking into the new album from the band Bleed From Within, entitled Fracture, which was released today through Century Media Records. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Bleed From Within, they're a metal band based out of Glasgow, Scotland, and these guys have been around since 2005. And I discovered Bleed From Within about a few years ago through, I believe I saw one of my favorite YouTubers, and my boy Ryan, aka Super Metal 1993, was talking about it on one of his channels, or did like a music collection update, and I saw the name. I was like, that sounds pretty cool, and the name sounded pretty awesome. So I went and checked out all their stuff, and it pretty much clicked with me. And Bleed From Within are kind of like, for me, they're a very interesting band. They kind of like have like a mixture of like deathcore, but also have a little bit of like metalcore, even some like groove metal elements that kind of remind me a little bit of like Lamb of God or Machine Head, or even just melodic death metal. No, mostly in like the vocals and sort of like the instrumentation. While the vocals sort of like carry sort of like the aggression, but I also feel like instrumentally wise, it has a lot more, has some melody to it. But even going they've been putting out their albums since their 2009 debut album Humanity, which is a pretty solid album. And I believe their next album being 2010's Empire, I feel like it's just straight up deathcore. It kind of reminds me of like early like Bring Me the Horizon or even Suicide Silence a bit. Then I don't know, it just feels like that's pretty much what it reminds me of. It's just very just heavy, but also has a little bit of the melodic side to it. But I don't think they embraced their more melodic side until their third album, being Uprising, which has a lot more of that groovy stuff, but also has that some of that that deathcore-y kind of stuff. And of course, their previous album Era was a pretty good album as well. But here we are with the band's fifth full-length album, Fracture. Does this album kind of like live or top what Era has? In my honest opinion, I feel like it definitely has. I feel like the band pretty much stepped it up. Just one thing to know about is just like the vocals. I mean, Scott Kennedy's vocals, I just love how he just sounds just really gruff. And one thing I should also mention, when I first heard the first couple of songs, like a lot of people compared like Scott Kennedy's vocals to Winston from Parkway Drive. I don't know, just probably like the tonality wise, and a lot of people saying like it should have been, this is pretty much what Parkway Drive and Bleed From It should have been doing with like the similar style that what Bleed From Within are doing, which I mean, I could sort of see it like that, but I don't really consider it because they're two completely different bands. But Scott, I feel like his vocals have really just improved a lot. The guitar work is just really tight. Stephen Jones and Craig Gowen's guitar playing is just as tight as ever. Just the soloing is just really just melodic, and just like the rhythmically it just sounds really great. The bass on this album is really audible compared to previous albums. Yeah, I feel like Davey Proven's bass playing he really just stepped it up, and it really shines on this album. And drumming wise, Ali Richardson can do no wrong. He's a hell of a drummer. One of the most underrated drummers in my opinion. So yeah, without further ado, let's dive into this album track by track, because I rambled on for about 3 minutes. But starting things off is The End of All We Know, which starts off with some really sick guitar work, and then the drums come in for a bit, which sort of like builds up the song, and then just all hell breaks loose. It's just a song that makes you just want to bang your head. And I really love the chorus in here. It just sounds melodic as well, and I really love how it has a little bit of clean. It's like you could definitely tell like the vocals started sounding a little bit more melodic compared to previous albums, in my opinion. Anyway, moving on to the next song on the album, which is called Pathfinder, which begins with sort of like a weird kind of like distorted synth sound a bit, but then it just shoots just right then and there. And I really love just like the massive breakdowns just hammer through. It's just insane. Moving on to Into Nothing, which is a heavy chugging song. It's just a very mid-paced tempo song, and I love that it picks up the tempo over about like halfway through the song, and it just builds up into like a sick guitar solo, and it just has some like sick riffs in there, and then it pretty much fades out. Fall Away, which just continues sort of like the very aggressive nature of Bleed From Within, and just some very just rugged riffs thing, and just some really just rapid like tempo changes, and it just the drumming and just the insane leads just really just intensify the song tenfold. Moving on to the title track of the album being Fracture, which begins with some very kind of like mood-like atmospherics and some really good clean vocals, and then just goes into some of the most technical and sort of like insane riffage. And there's sort of like just like crazy sort of like guitar licks that provide just like that really just fit with sort of like the melodic elements and like the choruses of the song. And I love like the alternation between the two styles just works really well with this song. Then we move on to Night Crossing, which has a very kind of like epic feeling. It's sort of like just builds up in the beginning, and I just love how Scott's vocals come in and just really sick. And I love how like near the beginning of each verse you could definitely hear like the little sick bass line in here. Definitely one of the few moments that you hear the bass on this album. But man, the vocals, I love this. It just sounds really just heavy and melodic in the chorus, and I just love the music video of the song, which just has the band sort of like in like a video chat, since of course we're still currently in quarantine. And then I love how about then the slow sort of like slows down a little bit and actually features a guest guitar solo from Matt Heafy of Trivium, which sounds pretty cool. And then after that it just picks up to its original speed, and then it just ends right there. For All to See, which has some really just really great drumming and just another melody, and I just love it. And I love how Scott's just roars in this song. And this song actually ends, there's kind of like a little bit of like weird kind of like atmospheric sounds that end weird. Moving on to Ascend, has some really cool just frantic grooves, and also shows like the band's like genty side it as well. It definitely has a little bit of like polyrhythms in there. You're one of the more heavier songs in my opinion. Utopia, I really love this song. It pretty much has some like guitars that sound very just classical a little bit, which has kind of like also a little bit of like an atmospheric vibe to it, and it's just full of stuff we would love to hear in a heavy metal song, just like fast riffs. And I love like just the sweepy intro and just like really great chord progressions and some really great breakdowns. And then the album closes with A Death That No One Dares. And I feel like this song just has everything that this album pretty much has so far. Just like the bass and the guitars just really shine in this song, and just like the leads sort of like create like a really great catchy like hook in here. And this pretty much ends the album on an absolute high note. So overall, Fracture from Bleed From Within is a really good album. And I would love to see them live. I really hope they come in toward the US soon. I would love to see them live. I feel like some of these songs would just go great in a live setting. So if I were to give this album a score, I'm going to give Fracture by Bleed From Within probably a 9.5 out of 10. It's a really good album. So yeah, that's my review of the new album, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it, and I'll see you all in the next video. And as always, keep it metal.